And I'm really excited to continue on in our series on worship. So if you've been joining us for the last couple of weeks, we've really been in this incredible series where we've been taking a look at worship. And I imagine for many of you, just like I myself, I've really been learning a lot. And if you weren't here, I'm gonna give you a real quick little recap. In the first week, Pastor Matthew talked about worship that is and isn't acceptable to God. And then Pastor Mary, she gave us a message about the importance of physically responding when we worship. And I don't know about you, if you were here that Sunday, the end of our service was so incredibly powerful. I love the ways that all of you engaged with it and you allowed God to move and work. And that is the most worshipful I think I have ever seen our church on a Sunday morning. And then Pastor Matthew talked to us about what sacrificial worship looks like. And then last week, Pastor Jonathan, I loved his message. I love what he brought for us. And he talked about a lot of different portions of worship, especially when it comes to musical worship, but then even into our lives. And I want to remind you, the three main points that really stuck out to me was he said that worship in the extraordinary. We are to worship in the extraordinary. And those are moments like what we get to experience on a Sunday morning. Those are kind of what I almost call those mountaintop experiences, maybe at youth camp or at a chapel. And then he said, worship in the pain. And that one really resonated with me because that's a really hard one to do sometimes. Worship in the pain. And then the last one that he said was worship in the mundane. And I don't know about you, that was the point that really stuck with me this week. And so oftentimes throughout this week, I feel like laundry is a never-ending task in my house. And there's only 3 of us. So it is amazing to me, the amount of laundry that I do. But all throughout this week, I kept thinking about worship in the mundane. And so as I was folding laundry, I was worshiping God, thanking him for his provisions, thanking him for the people in my house that I get to love and to serve. And today we're gonna take a look about worship and we're gonna take it a little bit deeper. And it really is worship that truly shapes our lives. And so as we begin, I wanted to start with kind of a visual and object lesson. So you can see I have this table here and I want you to imagine for a moment that my husband and I invited you to come to our house for dinner. And I wanna give a little disclaimer. This is all hypothetical. This is not true in our house. So just know that as we get into this morning. But I imagine we invite you over to dinner. We're having a great conversation. We're having a wonderful time. And now it's time for dessert and maybe coffee. It would be decaf coffee for me because if I drank any coffee with caffeine after 2 o'clock, I'm up all night. But we go to our couch and we're sitting there and we're having dessert. And all of a sudden you notice this table in the middle of our living room. And I imagine in your head, you're going, well, this feels like it should be really important. It's right in the middle of their family space, and it has a cross on it. And I imagine you'd be like, but this seems really strange and really odd. So you ask us, you say, hey, what's with that table in the middle of your room? I understand the cross because you guys love Jesus. Stacey, you're a pastor. I know your family really wants to honor God in everything that you do. But what's with that golden horse? And imagine if in that moment I say to you, oh, that's just another God that we worship. That's gonna be really strange, isn't it? And in your head, you're probably thinking, I cannot get out of this house fast enough. I don't know who these strange people are. They are worshiping some other God. You're probably also questioning your choice in a church as well and looking up what other churches you might be able to attend because this seems really off. And you'd probably even be a little insulted by the fact that a pastor at your church had an idol up on the table where they also had the cross. But here's my question with that. As we really think about this, I wanna ask you, who or what is it that you worship? Who or what is it that you worship? And yet again, you're probably sitting here going, I don't know who this lady is up here teaching today, but now yet again, you're asking me, I'm literally sitting in church right now. Who do you think that I worship? But the truth is, I think we all want to say God, but I think oftentimes there are other idols in our lives. There are other things that we make a higher priority than God, and we aren't truly giving him the worship that he deserves. And so we're gonna take a look at this today, and we're really gonna evaluate, and I'm gonna be really honest, because I wrestled with this as I was preparing this message. It's gonna be challenging, but I encourage you, come forward with it with an open heart and an open mind, because I think God wants to teach every single one of us something today. And so let's get into this. Let's start at the very beginning. If you don't know, God established a people for himself. And in establishing this people, he gave them the 10 commandments. And these really were the 10 parameters, these things that he was like, this is gonna lead you to life abundantly. It's gonna help you grow in your walk and relationship with me. And so let's take a look at the very first commandment that God gives his people. In Exodus 20, beginning in verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And before we get too far into this, I really want to paint a picture for you, because I question the fact, why in the world did the Almighty God have to tell his people not to have any other gods above him? Why in the world would a God, get this is what God just did. He did this supernatural act by saving the people. They were slaves in Egypt. And finally, Pharaoh was allowing them to go because of God's power and these plagues that he had put upon them. And so the people of God are fleeing, and they come to a sea. So obviously they're trapped, and the Egyptian army is coming after them. But God, in his supernatural power, he parts the sea. The people of God walk across on dry land. As soon as they are across, he closes the sea, and the Egyptian army is defeated. The Egyptian army is taken under by the sea. And if that wasn't enough, God is speaking to them through lightning and thunder and a loud voice. I don't know about you, but truthfully, I wish that's how God would speak to me. I wish that I heard a thundering voice every time God wanted to speak to me. But think about it. They had all these incredible physical acts that they could physically see and hear God moving. And yet God had to tell them, don't have any other gods above me. And the reason that God had to tell them that is because he knew that they would wander. And he knew that we would wander. It's because it's a natural part of human life. Because of the fall and because sin entered into the world, God knew that we were gonna be a people who would wander. I mean, think about this. Let's even take a look at the people of Israel. When times are good, we wander. Because oftentimes then we begin to believe in ourselves, and we begin to think that we are the ones who have given the blessing. And if you look at the people of God, right after this moment, after God had delivered them, given them the 10 commandments, the people of God, they made golden calves. They made other idols. Or maybe think about it this way: when times are bad, we wander. The first time that the people of God felt threatened, that they were hungry, that they were thirsty, get this, they longed to go back to slavery, not trusting in the God who had delivered them. When times are stressful, we wander. When the people of God, so God had promised them that they were gonna get this promised land, and it was going to be for his people. But there were other people living there. And so when they came to the promised land, they were frightened and they wanted to leave. They wanted to flee. And when times are confusing, we wander. Every time life did not go as the Israelites expected, they wandered, and they wanted and longed for other gods. And so I ask you, in those moments, when times are good, when times are bad, when things are stressful or you're overwhelmed, what is it that you wander to. Because the truth is that whatever you are prone to wander to will show where your priority is. Whatever you are prone to wander to shows where you truly put your trust. And the thing is that the things I choose to prioritize reveal the condition of my heart. Point number one today is the things I choose to prioritize reveal the condition of my heart. Or you could even say the things I'm prone to wander to reveal the condition of my heart. And so I think it's so easy for us to sit here and to think, yet like I was saying, we're sitting in church. Obviously, we are prioritizing God. And I think so many times in our hearts and in our minds, we think that we have God as the number one priority in our lives. Well, let's do a little evaluating this morning and let's see if really God is the number one priority in all of our lives. And so I've asked the team, I'm hoping they're gonna be able to put it up there. If I were to ask you what your priorities are, I imagine most of our lists would look like this. Most of us, if I were to say, write down right now what your priority list, we all would want this perfect list where God's number one, then our spouse, then our children if we have them. If you don't have a spouse, maybe it's another relationship in your life. Then friends, family, job, hobbies, right? That looks like a perfectly packed list, doesn't it? But what I want to mention and what I want to say right now is that I think the opposite is honestly true in most of our lives. In fact, I think if I were to say to you, really evaluate your life right now. Where do you spend your time, your resources, your money? I think instead, most of our priority lists would look like this. Oh, did you see that? They were right on with that. I think our children are often the top priority in our lives. And here's what I know. I just offended about half of the room. Don't get me wrong, I can be a mama bear with the best of them. But truth be told, I think we live in a society and in a world where we're allowing our kids to dictate our lives, where we're allowing our children and their activities to take a higher precedence than God. And then for many of us, then it's a job. You don't know, maybe you're going for a promotion or you have to work really long hours. Don't get me wrong, we have to have jobs because we need money in order to buy things and to live and survive. But sometimes we make our job a higher priority than our relationship with God. And then money. And then for some of us, our spouses aren't even in the place where they should be, that they have found themselves further down on the line than in the second place where they really honestly should be. And then our hobbies and our friends and our family. And if we have time, then we will add God as a priority in our lives. And this is hard hitting. And I want you to know I wrestled with this week because I think sometimes my priority list can look like this too. And it's really easy because what happens is every little decision is an opportunity to either have God as the top priority or not. And little by little decisions we make every single day will dictate and oftentimes cause God to not be the number one priority and to slowly find his way down our priority list. And what we need to know about this is that when we elevate other things above God, our worship becomes divided, revealing that he is no longer our highest priority. When we elevate other things above God, our worship becomes divided, revealing that he is no longer our highest priority. So I want to go back to this object lesson for a second, because as if I haven't already challenged you, I want to give some examples of what this might actually look like in our lives as we are evaluating. So let's start with our kids. Oftentimes, we allow our children and their activities to dictate the things that we're doing in our lives. And so we go, okay, here's what I imagine. I know this is happening right now. Many of you are going, Stacey, you don't understand. my child is the star athlete. And they are gonna get a scholarship someday, and they are gonna go pro, and they're gonna be in the World Cup. And I say to you, that's fantastic. But oftentimes, what happens in those moments is that we elevate our kids, we elevate their activities, and we put them on the altar instead of God. And so we put God to the side, and our kids get the priority in our lives. Or maybe, for you, it's a job. And I imagine yet again, you're saying in your head, okay, but Stacey, I'm working on this promotion. I'm so close. I'm so close to this promotion at work. I know I just gotta work 60 plus hours for the next couple weeks, and then when that is done, it's gonna be better. But what happens when you get that promotion? Then you continue to work more hours. And you say, oh, you know what? I gotta work late tonight. I'm not gonna be able to go to Connect Group. Or you say, you know what? I'm not gonna be able to go to church because Sunday will give me an opportunity to get caught up on all the things I didn't get done, so I'm ready for Monday. And slowly, without realizing it, our jobs are on the altar, and God is no longer our highest priority. Or the same can be true with money, or our hobbies, and so on and so forth. And these things begin to creep up, and then without realizing it, we have made idols in our lives that we are worshiping above the one true God. So what do we do with that? What do we do with that when we come to the realization that God is no longer the top priority, and we have, in fact, made idols and other things more important than our relationship with Him? Well, we're gonna take a look at Psalm 115 to kind of help us really dive into this and lay this out for us. So in Psalm 115, verse 1, it begins and it says, "Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness." And what I love is what the psalmist is doing right here in this moment is he is saying, it is not about me, it is not about my job, it is not about my money, it is about God. All the glory, all the worship belongs to God. And the reason is because of who He is and what He has done for us. And so then the psalmist continues, and he said, "Why should the nations say, 'Where is their God?' Our God is in the heavens. He does all that He pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands." I love this. And I think it's such a beautiful visual for us, because what he is saying is he's saying, our God is the creator. He's not creation, He is the creator. Our God is in the heavens. Our God is all-knowing. Our God is supernatural. Our God is living and breathing. Their gods, their idols, they were created. They are powerless. At some point, they will end. And so the psalmist is really trying to encourage us and remind us exactly who it is that the God that we worship. And so continuing on in the psalm, he says, "They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see. They have ears, but do not hear, noses, but do not smell. They have hands, but do not feel, feet, but do not walk, and they do not make a sound in their throat." And ultimately what the psalmist is saying is he's saying these other idols, these things that we make gods in our lives, they are powerless. I mean, think about it. Think about the things that we oftentimes allow to have power over our lives. Our kids, that's a tough one. Our kids, social status, money, jobs, other people. And what he's saying here in this moment is he's reminding us, he says, divided worship is not worship. You cannot have divided worship because one thing will take precedence over the other. You can't worship God and money. You can't worship God and your kids, because ultimately one thing will be lifted higher than the other. And so the psalmist is really reminding us these things that we're giving the opportunity to have power over our lives are worthless. They're idols compared to the one true God. And he closes out the psalm by saying this: those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them. And what the writer of the psalm is declaring to us in this moment is that we become like what we worship. We become like what we worship. And I want you to think about it this way. Think about it this way. If you are worshiping the things of this world, you become like the world. If we worship money, if we worship social status, if we worship anything else above God, the truth is that we become like it. And not only do we become like it, but we become mastered by it, making us powerless, allowing it to have the power over our lives, allowing it to dictate every single decision that we make. But on the flip side, when we worship the one true God, when the one true God is the highest priority in our lives, we find security. We find hope. We find peace. We know we are loved. We aren't no longer mastered, but we are loved by an almighty God and creator. And so our worship cannot be divided. It has to be given to God and God alone. But I imagine in this moment, you're sitting here and you might be going, but how do we change that? How do we change this? How do we make sure that God really truly is the top priority in our lives? How do we make sure that we really are worshiping God and God alone, not making other things an idol above him? Well, I want to share a story with you. And this is the story of Elijah. And I believe we've taught on it before, but I just think that this is a really powerful image to help us really see how powerless the idols are in our lives. So you see, Elijah was a prophet of God. And God had, in this moment, told Elijah to go and to talk to the people of Israel. Because at this time, the people of Israel were no longer serving and honoring the one true God. Surprise, surprise, this happened to them a lot. I feel like their lives were just one big roller coaster. We're following God, we're not following God. We're following God, we're not following God. And in this moment, they're not following God, and they're actually worshiping the idols and the gods of Baal. And so God calls Elijah, and he says, I want you to go and talk to the people to remind them who the one true God is. So Elijah goes, and in 1 Kings 18, picking up in verse 21, this is what happens. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? And I want to stop there for a second, because every time I practiced this week, and every time I read this really stuck out to me. You really think about it. They had no security because they were limping back and forth between gods. That's not security. They're limping because they had forgotten who the one true God is. So then it continues, and it says, if the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. And in my notes, as I read this, I wrote, their silence spoke louder than their words. And I don't know what was going on in their hearts and minds in this moment, but I imagine they were feeling really challenged because they knew their God had delivered them. They knew that every single time they were following their God, he was faithful to keep his promises. But for some reason in this moment, they had wandered once again and were not worshiping the true God. So what happens next is, I always like to say this is a battle of the gods. So they're gonna put the battle of the gods to the test. So the prophets of Baal are going to build an altar, and Elijah is gonna build an altar. And what they want is that whoever's God ignites the altar, that is the one true God. So the prophets of Baal, they build their altar, and then they dance and they sing. And honestly, they do some very unquestionable things, but I'm gonna keep this PG today. You can read it for yourself in 1 Kings 18 if you'd like. But they rely really on their own power if you think about it. They're doing all of these things to summon their God. And here is what happens. In 1 Kings 18:29, and as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice. No one answered, no one paid attention. Absolutely nothing happened, proving yet again that their God was powerless. So then Elijah, he builds an altar. And not only does he build an altar, but get this, he douses his altar in water. Douses it. I'm not talking like takes a water bottle and just kind of drips it on there. He douses this with water to make sure to prove a point that if this altar ignites, if it is on fire, it had to be the power of the one true God. And then what I love is Elijah, before he does anything else, he prays, proving it had nothing to do with his power, but everything to do with the God that he served. And here's what happens, picking up in verse 38. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." The God of Israel showed up. Our God showed up, proving yet again that it is he alone who has the power. It is he alone who is worthy of our adoration, worthy of our praise, worthy to be the top priority in our lives. And so many times throughout Scripture, so what we see after this, the people of God, they follow after him once again. And every single time they followed after God, they walked in obedience and they allowed him to direct their path. He was faithful. He kept his promises. He walked with them. And it's because of this final truth. When God alone is worshiped, everything else gets put into its proper place. When God alone is worshiped, everything else gets put into its proper place. And so I want to end today with this object lesson. And I really hope you'll take this visual with you throughout this week. Because I imagine something has stirred in your hearts and in your minds. And I imagine every single one of us can think of an idol or something in our lives that has taken priority to God. And I'm gonna share a little bit of those things for me, but I also wanna close with some examples to help us to see that it really is the decisions that we make in our life that point us to our priorities. That other people will know we are followers of Jesus based on how we live our lives. And that's when worship truly does shape our lives. So if you think back to that priority list that I have, I'm gonna start with my kid. I'm gonna get emotional. I get emotional every single time I talk about her. We struggled to have children. So that little girl who's almost taller than me now, man, I love her fiercely. And I'd do anything for that kid. And here recently in our lives, the pressure to join club volleyball has been real. Because we love watching her play volleyball. I want her to succeed. Honestly, she could use a little bit more of a challenge in her life. But the truth is that every single time somebody has approached us and they've said, man, your daughter, I think she would really, really benefit from being a part of a club volleyball team. And we'll talk about it, and oftentimes I'll ask the people, well, do you know when games are? 9 times out of 10, you wanna know when they are. they're on Sundays. And so that's been a really hard decision. But can I tell you a truth? I love watching her play volleyball, but the thing that's most important to me is that she follows Jesus, that she knows Jesus. And so what we've made the decision, I'm sorry, I know she doesn't always like it when we tell her no, but God is in charge of our house. God is the highest priority in our house. And if you played club sports, you wouldn't be able to come to church. Maybe we wouldn't be able to lead our connect group. You wouldn't be able to grow in community. And so you know what? We're gonna say no because we want her to be in her rightful place and for God to be the top priority. Or maybe for you, this is another one I struggle with, your job. Truth be told, this is gonna sound really weird coming from a pastor because you know what? We're doing the Lord's work, right? We're ministering to people. But I have found in my own life that oftentimes my job can be an idol. Oftentimes I put all of my time, my effort, my resources into it, which isn't a bad thing because yet again, I'm serving God. But here recently, I've even learned that oftentimes I can allow it to become my identity, whether I'm successful or I'm not. And even here with making the transition in my position, my to-do list feels like it is never ending. And there have been so many moments here recently where I have really been like, okay, God, I can just answer a couple emails on a Friday and then I'll get to my Sabbath. And time again, God's saying, what's the idol in your life? You're allowing your job to dictate. You're allowing your job to be a higher priority. So in those moments when I'm convicted and challenged, I'm like, you know what, God, you're right. I want you to be number one again. I want to worship you because I know that when I take my Sabbath, that you fill me up. And then I'm a better pastor. I'm a better director, a better coworker, better spouse, better mom. And so I'm gonna put you back in your rightful place. Or maybe it's money. Yet again, I remember when my husband and I first really felt convicted and challenged to start tithing. And it was gonna be tight. It was gonna be really tight. At that point in time, I'm gonna be really vulnerable. We were in a lot of debt. We had a child in diapers, and I just didn't know how it was gonna work. But we were encouraged by the people here. We were really challenged by God, and so we gave. And we said, you know what, God? We trust you because your word says you cannot love God and money. You cannot worship God and money. So we're going to lay this down at your altar. We are going to trust what you are going to do with it. And now I'm so thankful that we did because now we're probably in the best financial place we've ever been. And we are at a point where money no longer has a grip on us and we can choose to be generous without even having to think twice about it. And it's all because in that moment we said, I no longer want to make money an idol in my life. I want God to be the highest priority and to put money back in the place where it belongs. And I'm sure I could go on and on and on with so many different stories. And I really hope that for you this morning, that you're feeling challenged. But not only feeling challenged, but also encouraged. Because all it takes is one decision, and God can be placed back where he belongs. God can be placed as the highest priority in your life. And so my final encouragement to you today is make God the top priority. Allow him to lead and guide every decision of your life because just as I have shared with all of the things that my family has done, every single time we have made God the highest priority, somehow he's just taking care of the rest. Everything else is in its proper place. When I am serving God, when I am honoring God, when I am worshiping God, I do better as a mom. I'm better as a spouse. I'm better as a pastor. Because when I'm allowing God to lead and guide my life, I know he's gonna take care of the. So I want to encourage us at both campuses this morning, do me a favor and bow your heads. And I'm gonna pray here in a moment, but I also want to encourage and challenge you. What is that idol in your life? What is that thing in your life that you have made a higher priority than God. Let's take this opportunity to surrender it to him. Let's pray. God, I'm so thankful that you are a loving God who pursues after us. And what I know, this was a hard-hitting message. It was hard-hitting for me to write. It was hard-hitting because you challenged me in so many different things that I make idols in my life. And I imagine all my friends here today feel the same way. But what I also know is that, God, we long for you to be put back in your rightful place. We want for you to be the highest priority in our lives. And so whatever it is that we know that we have placed above you, I pray that today is a day that we lay it down at your altar once again. That we allow you to lead and guide us. That we know that every decision we make is a decision to worship you or to not. To worship you or to place other things as idols in our lives. God, our heart's desire is to worship you. So I'm praying that as you have challenged us today, that you will help us. Help us surrender those things to you. Help us to allow you to lead and guide us, trusting and knowing that when we worship you and you alone, everything else is put in its proper place. So God, we give these things to you. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.